If we can identify a number of factors that are modifiable and we can institute changes, either regulatory or lifestyle, that could reduce that risk of cancer, perhaps not to nothing, but much lower, I would consider my research a success.
John is actually one of Canada's premier epidemiologists and biostatisticians working in the area of cancer prevention. And he's the head of the Cancer Control Research Department at the BC Cancer Agency, a professor in the School of Population and Public Health at UBC. And John is also the leader of the BC Generations Project. And that is a project involving 40,000 British Columbians who are being followed over the long term to determine what factors contribute to their cancers. His work is primarily on modifiable factors, so environmental factors, lifestyle factors that contribute to cancers. And these are particularly important because they're modifiable, and his studies have been important in cancer prevention, understanding the risks of aluminum workers, occupational cancer, understanding the risks of lymphoma with pesticide exposure, and beginning to understand the risks of how different exposures will affect people differently depending on their genes. And that's a brand new field that John is engaged in. He also works at many other levels. So in addition to doing his own studies on cancer prevention, he's very involved in other people's studies. He's often a collaborator on local studies or on national studies. He's invited to be involved in these studies because he's a great collaborator. And he's involved at the national level as well with cancer research funding organizations. And he's involved in international consortia as well, where scientists will pool data and pool samples to do larger projects than you could do on your own. One other aspect of John is he's always willing to help his colleagues, particularly design studies. And I know that many of my colleagues at the Cancer Research Center will come to John and say, how many mice do I need to do this? How many people do I need to do this experiment? And he always tries to educate you a little bit rather than just say the answer is 12. John's level of engagement is very high, and he actually has made a big difference. For example, at the international level, John's study on lymphoma represents Canada in Interlymph. So if it were not for John and his study, Canada would not necessarily be involved in Interlymph, which is an organization that has studies from all over the world. And so part of this international engagement is having people step up and say, I will put my study in with the collective, and I will engage in these activities that involve shared credit rather than just a spotlight. And John is a person who naturally does that without necessarily thinking of himself. He contributes toward the collective very much. John is particularly deserving of this award because he works so well on a variety of levels. He does excellent cancer research in his own right. He also cares a lot about mentoring trainees, students and postdocs, and junior faculty in his department. And he also operates at all possible levels. Local, provincial funding levels, he lends his opinion to them. National cancer research organizations, he provides input and chairs grant panels. And he's also involved at the international level in international consortia, like the Interlymph Consortium, where he's one of the key members. I think it would be inspiring for students to see what John has done, because he's a person who did all three of his degrees at SFU. And so really it shows that you can go on to a career that is engaged in science or your field of choice at international levels. So John, congratulations on behalf of your colleagues from the BC Cancer Agency on winning the SFU Outstanding Alumni Award for Academic Achievement.